Getting started on our project, one of the first things we'll need to know is our file structure naming conventions. So we've done a little bit with our Google Drive folder structure, having the assignments folder, and then underneath that, are we going to call this by the part name, a base, the part number? Those are kind of our two primary choices. So typically, I will go for the name. If you have a detailed part number, it's great for tracking in database, but you often need a secret decoder ring to know what it is you're dealing with and what it is that you need. So something that's either a combination. Most companies are going to have this pre-decided for you, and you're going to follow their naming conventions and file structures as you get into the mix. So this is a metric part, and we're going to create our first bit of geometry, part millimeter. So that takes me into my template. You can start on the front plane, but then the geometry is going to go this way for that little L shape. If we start on the top plane, then it's going to kind of go up and down. So right plane, and there is no rule that you have to make it look exactly like the drawing in the book or template. It's what you see when you see it, how you see it. If it's more convenient when you get into the drawing, I will just call it self-correcting behavior. Bringing this part into the assembly, there is an advantage having it in an orientation that you want it in from the part going into the assembly, from the part going into the drawing. That makes it easier. All right, and as you work with and develop those strategies, it will become a second instinct, a second nature. So I'm going to open up the sketch on the right plane. I'm thinking in terms of my 3 view that the L shape will kind of go this way. And let's go with the command manager and line. And I'm just going to drag a line starting at the origin. I can see the little yellow coincidence. I left click and hold down, and as I drag, I see the little yellow horizontal and let go. I really don't care about those lengths because this is going to auto scale. So same thing, grab the endpoint of the line we just created, drag up, let go of the mouse, and those dimensions, once we put in the first dimension, once the first smart dimension, that will get our geometry going and where we can actually size it. All right, so same thing, I'm dragging it out, and then left click on the endpoint, hold down, drag up, watching for that little yellow box. And worst case that happens, I miss. I see my inference line, but I don't get the little yellow box telling me that it's horizontal. No big deal, we will get to that. All right, and then dragging it back to the endpoint, and then I like to right click and select. I could hit escape. There are other methods to work from. All right, so at this stage we've got the little green dots on, and these little green dots are all of the relations. At some point they will take over or just become annoying. And so on our view, again, whenever you're working with the hide show items, if you click on the eyeball, it's going to hide show everything. We only want it to do selections here. So clicking the little down arrow will come about halfway down to view sketch relations and turn those off. So rather than having them always on, just the objects that I select are going to show me the coincident, the horizontal, the coincident, and the vertical. All right, so let's fix this one since I missed. And on the pop-up, I will see horizontal. So just clicking on the line, selecting the line, will take you in to make horizontal. Or over on the left, if we miss that little pop-up, there's kind of a little pause. If you move the mouse too quick, you won't see that little pop-up window, in which case you just come over to the property manager and tell it that it's horizontal. All right, so now we have if I left click, hold down and drag, I can see the movement, and I'm ready to start putting in dimensions. So we'll go to the smart dimension, pick an object for the height, and having done that, where is my height? So the first one that I pick is actually a missing dimension on the print. So that being the case, we know that we have 8, probably a 12 and a 12. So maybe we'll go for 32. That being the case, this would be one of those that I want to turn into an inspection dimension. I'm not sure. I want to come back to those numbers to be able to verify that that geometry. So we'll go with the 8. Now I am in ISO, and I do have some preferences for ISO, knowing that a lot of companies and a lot of standards are going to be for ANSI. So if you need to change to ANSI, that would be something where we'd go back to the options, go into your document properties, and pick ANSI. All right. Okay, so 32, again, you could make the assumption that this is 30 by 30, all right, but it's still missing dimension. So if I double click on it and tell it that it's 30, it will update. And with it still being a missing dimension, then I can leave that there as a reminder that there is a question of that geometry. All right, so that gets it good enough. The radiuses and fillets, radius fillets, chamfers are geometry that we would typically put in at the last, unless there's some reason. We could put in the 3 millimeter radius in the corner. That would be okay, but I'm not too worried about it at this point. So when we switch to features and tell it to extrude, we need to determine a direction. So again, I can drag this out and get a visual, and we can get close to the 138, but I'm going to drag it just off of the screen, so oh well. It's still easier to come over and type in 138, hit enter, and know that you have that size. All right, and then we'll go ahead and select it. So if you previously turned off the instant 3D, then we're good. If I pick on any of these faces, I'm not going to see that orbit. If your instant 3D is on, you will get some of the geometry. Sometime you'll get an orbital, and we don't want to accidentally drag any of those things. So the instant 3D and the instant 2D should be off until you decide that you need them. All right, so my next shapes, let's go with the pattern. So I select the face and I hit Control 8. If, let's see, I rotate that over and I hit the space bar, we can see the box, and I'll hit that again for the orientation. Right? Or we can just go through, and if I hover over those, it will show me the bottom Control 6, the front Control 1. We'll go through those items. I'm going to move that over a little bit, see if I can make it a little bit bigger. All right, so now that that is toggled on, the view selector, Control Spacebar. Every time I hit the spacebar, I should see that first. All right, if we turn it off, then I would just be selecting out of the standard views. All right, so for the first sketch, I have to decide if I want to make this a whole wizard item or a standard sketch. So this being our first go around, we'll compare the whole wizard versus the cut extrude feature. To get us going, we'll just go with the cut extrude. So sketch. All right, so right-clicking on the face, going into that sketch gets us started. And pick the circle. and click, and if it still continues to drag, I'll click again. Going to put a dimension and our diameter. Well, another missing dimension, so we will go with the 10. That looks a little bit big, so maybe 8. Alright, and then from the back of the part, and again, picking these edges is as long as you can project that edge, whether this is the top edge of the part, the bottom edge of the part, something in between, it doesn't really matter because it can be projected into the current plane. So 19.4, and we're 7.96 off of the edge. Alright, so if we're going to do this as a linear sketch pattern, linear sketch patterns and circular patterns always have a little bit of issues getting them to go fully defined. We'll see what we get. So our 7 by 20 millimeters, we have a total of 8 items. So depending on the software you're working with, sometimes you'll want to put in 7, sometimes you'll want to put in 8. SolidWorks is a total, so if I put in the 8 total, and then 20 millimeters, 8, fix the X and the X-axis. I say we should get a preview, except I haven't selected anything yet. So entities to pattern at the bottom, that would help. Once we see those, then we can get our geometry in there. Alright, so what did I tell it to do? 7 by 20 for a total of 140, which is interesting. Oh, that 138. So as I mentioned with the iterative process, we have 12 on the ends. So instead of the 138 being between the being the overall length, it was the 160 on the bottom that I needed. Alright, so we'll go ahead and accept. No problem. Sketch isn't, well, Sketch did go fully defined. I didn't end up with a minus sign there, but since I haven't tried to cut anything yet, we'll just go ahead and change that to the 160. And with the change, I don't get an immediate result. I have to rebuild it. So now I have something that looks more appropriate. We'll edit that sketch. Everything went to black because I was checking the dimension and applying the x-axis. So we get that geometry in place. Now I can go into the features, extrude cut, and we're just going to tell it up to next or through all. Up to next is going to stop at the next piece of geometry, and we only have one piece of geometry, so that's okay. The through all would be if there were multiple levels there, it would allow it to go through each of those groups. Okay, so the two circles kind of have a mismatch. So let's go Control 8, which would also be the front view. And I'm going to right click again and sketch. Or again, you can come over and click sketch and pick your face, but I think it's easier just to get into the habit of right clicking and telling it to sketch on the face that you just picked. So those diameters are 10 millimeters. So that means the ones on the bottom could be as small as 6 millimeters, just kind of giving it a relative relative scale. All right, so 10 millimeters, and then that one's a little bit lower, and the one on the right's a little bit higher. So maybe this will be, let's see what 13 millimeters from the top looks like. I'll go ahead and get out of the dimensions. And since these are 10 two places, we're intending that these will always be the same size. I'm going to select the first circle, hold down the control button, select the second circle, and make equal. Again, you can come over to the property manager, and that takes care of setting them to equal, takes care of their dimension. Height-wise, since they are not even, we'll go with the 12 on this side, which will kind of match, relatively well match the radius. All right, and then now we have the 138 between the two. And then we would either need to do the 12 to get it positioned. And I can't really do symmetry here, so putting a center line and having any kind of symmetry when the dimensions for the vertical location are that much different, can't go that route. So I think the 12 off of the edge is fine. If I needed to check, does my math add up, then we could go and apply one more and make this dimension driving. So why doesn't my math add up? Oh, 160 and 138 and 12, and 12 more would be 162. Interesting. All right, so one of those is 12 and one of them is 10, and a little bit higher. All right, so looks good. There are other tricks if I was really concerned about this, but I want to get you into that mode of, as the designer, you have to make these decisions. These are your choices, and you get to make the ultimate decision here. So go back into features, extrude cut. We'll stay with the up to next and OK. And that gets me to where I'm ready to put the radiuses and the debossed text in.